Hey y'all, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Mogi Beth. For those of y'all who are new here, I am a full-time reseller on Poshmark, eBay, Mercari, and Tradesy. And Matt is too, I guess now. So today we are doing a Q&A mukbang, which if y'all are like, what is a mukbang? It's a video trend that was popular like last year, but it originated in South Korea, where people would just eat food while making a video. So that's what we're doing, and we're doing it because we get to kill two birds with one stone, maximize efficiency, and eat lunch while we make a YouTube video. So we actually ordered Korean food because that just sounded really good. So we're going to eat Korean food, answer y'all's questions, and have a grand old time. Today's questions Matt actually curated from y'all, mainly questions that y'all asked me on Instagram, Poshmark, and YouTube. And the reason, and that's because I get a lot of questions these days on all three of those places, and I don't have time to answer a lot of them. Most of them honestly are requests for me to look at someone's individual closet or give personalized career or reselling advice, and I don't have time to do that for free, and I currently don't offer those services. But some of y'all asked questions that I think would actually be super helpful for me to address, especially here on YouTube, because a lot of y'all potentially have these same questions. So Matt went ahead and grabbed a bunch, and we are going to jump into it. And just FYI, if you've ever sent me a question that I haven't answered, please just know I appreciate it so much that you value my opinion. I am not answering because I don't value you and I don't value your time. It's just I don't personally have time. So I try to turn off Instagram DMs, but there's no way to do that apparently. And I just don't want to be disrespectful to y'all, but at the same time, I just simply, between YouTube, reselling, managing employees, I'm just constantly short on time. So thanks for understanding, y'all. But without further ado, let's jump into the questions and start this mukbang. Okay, so I'm gonna start out with questions that I receive a lot. And the first one is, in just different ways people have asked, is it important to share to parties? I think especially because I have that 5 tips video that has received a lot of views, and I'll link that up on the screen if you haven't watched that. I talked about sharing a lot in that video, and so that's the biggest follow-up question to that video that I get. And my answer is, similarly to sharing to the feed, sharing to parties isn't really the biggest advantage to sharing in general. However, I would say sharing to parties is marginally better than sharing to the feed, very marginally. I don't make it a special point to share to parties. If I am sharing during a time when a party is happening, I'll share to the party instead of to the feed. So I hope that makes sense, but I don't think it's worth a conscious effort. The only retort to that I've heard that might be worth considering is that Poshmark has scheduled the parties during times in which the most amount of people are on the app, and that could very well be true. And in that case, you might want to schedule your sharing practices around when parties happen, but generally I don't think it's that big of a deal.
And just for some clarification for myself as well, and maybe for others, when presented the option of sharing to a party or to followers, sharing to followers boosted rankings, right, when it comes up in search. But if you search, but if you also share to party, that will also do the same thing. So it's not either or. It's not either I get boosted in the search rankings or I share to this party. You can get two birds with one stone if you share to party.
Yeah, so basically the most important thing about sharing is that you are appearing higher in search. And that is the only reason to share. And that's true no matter where you share to. That isn't true when you share someone else's listing, which was the main point I made in one of those tips in the video. Okay, the next question, I get different forms of this question. Matt's gonna answer it. What do you consider a solid sell-through rate?
So I think, just from what I've seen around the community, I think it's important to understand that the sell-through rate is supposed to be a unit of measurement that happens over a period of time. So when I see some crazy, sell-through rates that people boast about, I have an 80% sell-through rate, I have a whatever. In my mind, I don't quite understand, because what we use for reference is over a month. If you've been watching Morgan and have been watching her videos, you'll see some of her sales videos. You'll say that I had this item for 2 years before I sold it. And if that's the case, then yeah, we have 100% sell-through rate over a horizon of 2 years. But that's not useful information to anyone, and particularly us. So we have all these metrics that we keep in order to have a better understanding of our business. And if we just expanded the horizon to encompass, technically we sell everything over a big enough period of time. But again, as I was saying, because we like to use a month as a reference point, personally we have 2 sell-through rates. We have the items that we add within a month, and then we have our entire closet's sell-through from the previous inventory that was carried over from the previous month. So to answer your question, that's kind of a long-winded way of saying we can't really answer your question, just because I know what ours is. Ours is doing fine, but I can't really compare it to what I've seen in the community, because our metrics are so different. And I think that there's a general misunderstanding of what sell-through rate is supposed to encompass, that I don't know if there's anything I could quite peg it to say this is good, this isn't good.
Yeah. And yeah, because there's just so many different ways of calculating that number, that if I throw something out there, that this is a good sell-through rate, someone else could retort, oh no, this is a good sell-through rate, but we're just comparing apples to oranges. So maybe in the future we'll do a video going over how we calculate that.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, the next question, which is a really important question, not only for resellers, but for all business owners, all entrepreneurs. And I have a book that I'm going to suggest anyone who's really struggling with this particular issue, I would suggest you read this book. So the question is, I'm just starting out and have definitely been spending more on my closet each month than I have been making in sales to build up my inventory. I know some investment is involved, but when/at what scale would you say your business started turning a profit? Personally, I started selling my closet very, very, very slowly. And if you've watched my $100,000 video, which I'll link up on the screen, which was going over when I hit the $100,000 amount in earnings on Poshmark milestone, you can see the first year of my sales are just really, 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 really slow. And that's mainly just because I started selling things from my closet, my own personal closet first, and then only really invested the money I was making over time. And so that's just a really slow growth, because you're not making a lot of sales, and so you have 100% reinvestment rate, but it just takes a long time to gain traction. So if you want to expedite that growth, it does require some form of investment, which is not necessary. I think slow growth is a fine strategy, just depending on what your goals are. But eventually you will reach a point where you're making profit, but you still want to grow. And so the question is, for all entrepreneurs and for all resellers, is how much profit do you take out? How much do you pay yourself? And then what is going to be your rate of reinvestment? And I can't give an answer for that question. It really depends on you. We want to grow really, really aggressively. So we basically take a small salary, a modest salary that pays our bills, and then reinvest everything else. We don't really claim, other than owner's pay, we don't really have a profit per se. We just reinvest. But that isn't necessarily the best strategy. There's a lot of different thoughts on this, and that's the book I'm going to recommend. It's called Profit First. I'll link it down below in the description. It talks about entrepreneurial poverty, and the concept is that entrepreneurs just continually reinvest so that they never ever really make money. And that's a reality for a lot of entrepreneurs, for a lot of resellers, for a lot of business owners. So I would highly recommend that book. It's definitely, a way to just shift your perspective and try to get a better understanding of, your managerial accounting and what you're prioritizing in your business, especially at your rate of growth. But I hope that helps answer your question.
I kind of want to add something.
Okay.
And just to kind of go off of that, I think it's important also that I think some people misunderstand the difference between profitability and cash flow. Technically, you can be profitable from day one. If you buy something for $5 and you sell it for $20, you made a profit. Now, from my understanding of the question is that you're spending more on inventory than what you're selling, and and what the profit is being generated from your sales, that doesn't mean that you're not profitable. If you give enough time, like our 2-year horizon for our sell-through rates, all of those inventory will eventually sell, and the only way you're not profitable is if you bought something for $5 and you sold it for $4. So one way I was always kind of taught about cash flow is the way to think about it is like agriculture is a great example. That industry is based off of like 2 harvesting seasons for the entire year. Does that mean every farmer is not profitable for all the dead months? No. When they're planting their crops, they may not be generating cash flow, but at the end, when they have their yield and they sell it all, they can definitely be profitable at the end of the year. So I think that's important to distinguish. And I think, and that's what a lot of people are curious, how do I generate enough positive cash flow where I could take money out and still have enough to reinvest into new purchases for inventory? And that's a whole different thing. So I just want to make sure that we don't conflate the two ideas of profitability and positive cash flow. I would say this though, it's easier to have a positive cash flow if you're going small and kind of at your own rate. Like Morgan was saying though, if you do want to grow aggressively, and you're right, it does take a level of investment, then that is harder to consistently have positive cash flow. Again, you can be profitable the entire time, but to be able to pull money out, if you want to grow aggressively, you have to get an employee. That's additional overhead that can eat into your cash flow. You have to keep purchasing inventory so you keep building your closet up and generate more sales. Obviously, as you already experienced, that takes a certain amount of investment, can hurt your cash flow. So I just want to make sure that we have an understanding on those different concepts and that we don't equate profitability to cash flow.
But yeah, I hope that was helpful to y'all. Definitely check out that book. It was definitely an eye-opener for me. I listened to it. I should probably listen to it again. Okay, our camera overheated, so we went ahead and ate a lot of the food, but it's fine because then we can answer these questions. So the next question is, what lighting kit do I use? I get this question in different forms a lot, and I have purchased everything before. I think almost everything. I have umbrella lights, I have a ring light, and I have box lights. And I think by far my favorite is the box lights. And in fact, I might want to get 1 or 2 more. The umbrella lights are good for like portraits and for more kind of specific lights. Box lights I think diffuse much better. And then ring lights, I really can't figure out the allure of a ring light. I don't know, I just can't, I don't like ring lights. Maybe someday someone will teach me how to use a ring light, but I don't like it.
And if you're looking for all this, it's in our Amazon affiliate store, so you can click on the specific one.
In the description down below, but you can always just go to amazon.com/shop/MogiBeth. Super easy to remember. Okay, the next question that I thought was really interesting, a good question. Would I pick up an item that has already been altered, for instance, jeans that have been hemmed? I think in general, if you took 2 pairs of jeans that were the exact same size, style, brand, one was hemmed and one wasn't, the hemmed one would take longer to sell and sell for less. But depending on if it was a good brand and depending on what the cost of goods was, it might still be worth picking up. So I have on accident purchased many hemmed jeans before, and I've sold many hemmed jeans before. So, it just depends on if you're willing to wait for an item to sell, what the brand is, how much you're paying for the item. There's a lot of variables in that decision, but generally, if I see that a pair of jeans has been hemmed before I purchase, I usually leave it behind just because I don't want to deal with that. But if you do pick one up, and if you feel inclined to pick one up, just make sure you're taking a picture of the hem and including measurements.
Cool.
Okay, the next question for Matt is, what kind of puppy do we have?
Our puppy
Aww.
is sleeping right now.
We just woke him
up. But our videos are always better with Ollie cameos anyway. He is not a puppy. He is actually almost 16 years old, this August?
Yeah.
So next month he turns 16.
Yeah.
He's our old man puppy. Ollie is a Maltese.
Yeah.
I believe he's a purebred Maltese.
Yeah.
And
I got him when I was in 7th grade.
Yes.
So he's my companion for life.
Okay.
Okay, next question. Have I ever considered making a podcast? Yes, I really...
Don't start her on this again.
I really want to start a podcast. If you guys have any suggestions for what that podcast...
Just keep them to yourself.
Let me know in the comments down below. I have a lot of different ideas.
You will be blocked immediately.
No. I have a lot of different ideas, but podcasts like YouTube take so much time. So before I commit to that, I want to make sure that I can actually show up consistently. And right now, again, I don't have much time, so not yet, but eventually, yes. Okay, this was an interesting question too. I love selling Madewell, but I'm getting nervous about the market being saturated. How do you know when it's time to jump ship on a specific brand style due to oversaturated market? For example, I hardly ever pick up Anthropologie unless it's basically free, but it took me longer than I like to realize I wasn't making a profit anymore. Okay, so the answer to this question is a little bit more difficult. First, I would say if you haven't watched the Anthropologie video, definitely watch that because I kind of go over this topic a little bit, and I'll link that on the screen. But I would say, let's take Madewell as a specific example. Madewell, probably overall, the general brand, the group of items, the value of them has decreased over time, over the past 3 years of me reselling. However, that is partially just because Madewell has been around longer, Poshmark has been around longer, and so more and more Madewell items have accumulated on the app. There are still, though, certain pieces within all of these brands that are not in such high supply that therefore have higher demand. So, and that generally is newer pieces, and Madewell in particular, denim still does really well. And so instead of making sweeping generalizations about brands like Anthropologie, Madewell, Free People, or whatever, which is why I don't really do like brands I don't pick up any more videos, although maybe I will do that in the future. But instead of making sweeping generalizations about brands, I tend to really focus in on, okay, what specific pieces within this brand are still doing well. And a good way of doing that is going to the solds of a brand and filtering by 50 to 100 or 100 to 250. And just kind of scrolling through and becoming accustomed with what is selling at a higher price point within these brands. And especially if you filter by just in, that will also just help make sure that those items are somewhat new. So that would be my advice, but generally I stick to newer pieces of those brands, and then also just try to understand what type categories and styles do better within those brands. Okay, so Matt's gonna answer this question. Do you think it takes longer to find the rare items that will yield more profit, or is it that they take longer to sell?
I'd say yes. Would you agree?
To both?
Yeah.
Yeah, both.
But so here's the thing though, and this is I think an important distinction, is that when you are looking, I like to think of these things in terms of the value of my time. So it's true, like a lot of people have very successful models. They'll go to the bins, they'll find things for a couple bucks, they'll sell them for 20, and they say, I can do this consistently. I've seen people say, I can go to the bins and find 20 items in 2 hours. Okay, that's great. And if you do the math, they're churning a steady profit, they're doing great. But the only thing I would caution against is that it also takes a certain amount of time to process those items, right? So you have to steam them, photograph them, list them, do all these things. That should be factored into how much time it actually takes. So while yes, it's true that it does take longer to find a more expensive item, to find the rare items that sell for more, if you can make a much bigger profit for the raw dollar value, not necessarily maybe the margin. Again, when we talked about that in our other video about the dollar profit versus the margin, in that case, it could be worth your time.
Yeah, and just to say something real quick, eventually once you get to a certain scale, your most precious resource is going to be time. And so I think it's a really good exercise to actually time how long you're spending in the thrift store versus how many items you're getting, and really put a value on your time and see how much, additional cost you can attribute to each and every item. And in doing that, you might be more selective. You might be willing to see things a little bit more differently in terms of picking up higher priced items.
The only thing I would say though is that if you do start getting very selective and you try to find like these rare, home run pieces, there are times, and I'm not even kidding, Morgan will go to a store for hours and come home with like 2 items. So if you're like, depending on where your goals are, you can easily point to that and say, that's not sustainable. I don't care how much money you sell. those items for, whatever your profit is, you know, unless it's some crazy Gucci $1,000 thing, it wasn't worth it. So I think finding that balance in between, you know, do I spend the additional effort to find these rare items? If you have a decent model where you can incorporate, and that's why I think I see people do both. They go to thrifting, they do online retail arbitrage, they go buy, sell, trade stores. They touch a lot of bases to kind of, you know, diversify their sourcing strategies. And I think that is a good way to kind of offset each disadvantage that may be inherent to one or another.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point too, because it also really depends on where you're located, because finding those higher end pieces might take you longer in certain cities, in certain states, in certain towns. And so it just might not be worth that investment of time. And so, or you could just, if you wanted to incorporate those in your closet, switch to an online sourcing strategy. But I think it's just really important at some point to start valuing your time and really incorporating that into, you know, at least mentally, into your mental accounting of your cost of goods. Okay, the last question is just kind of specific. I was wondering about how long girlfriend jeans usually sit in your inventory before they sell. And again, this really depends on the style. It really depends on the size. I would say different sizes, I've realized, in girlfriend jeans sell faster than others. But if you were to take like a generally like a girlfriend Carolina style, which is a really popular style within their brand that does really well, I would say it takes anywhere from like 2 weeks to 3 months. And it just kind of depends. If it's taking longer than 3 months, you might have things priced too high. But generally, I price things high, and that's just because I'm trying to make room for offers. I have a reservation in price in mind, which is basically the lowest price I'm willing to let this item go for. But girlfriend jeans, if you're willing to sell for cheaper, will definitely sell faster. So it also depends on the price that you're listing it at too. So this is what I'll say, and I think a lot of people in reselling want a guarantee. They want some stability. They want to feel some certainty in this business. The truth of the matter is you can do predictions, you can make risk assessments, but there's always inherent risk in every single thing you pick up and every single thing you do within this business, because you're not a stable employee of some other company. You are creating a company from scratch, and with that, in any industry, there's inherent risk. So there's no 100% guaranteed answer for any of these questions, and there's no 100% guaranteed answer for how to make sure you make X amount of money. There's a lot of variability, there's a lot of seasonality, there's just a lot of inherent risk. I just wanted to make that statement as well, just because, you know, that's the life of an entrepreneur. But hopefully we're just all learning as we go and getting better and making better and better decisions. Okay, well that is the video. Thank you all so much for joining us. I want to do another Q&A video, but I want all the questions to come from this comment section exclusively. So if you have any questions that we didn't address or answer, leave them down in the comments below, and in a couple weeks we will do another Q&A video and refer exclusively to the comment section. But anyways, I hope y'all are having a fabulous week. We love you. Thank you. See y'all in the next one. Bye.
Like and subscribe to this
YouTube
channel.
Check
out
our
other
videos.